Hello and namaste, my friends. This is your humble and eccentric host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. This is your favorite podcast, the Almost Daily Zencast. And that was brand new music from Gazuta. From their, I think, yet to be released album, Young Monet Chaplin, if I'm remembering the title correctly. I may or may not be right about whether or not that's been released previously. All I know is I have awesomely exclusive permission to use it now and in the near future. Gazuta, by the way, if you've never heard of them, is a band that you should check out. I'm not just saying that because they're paying me lots of money to say that. Because they're totally not paying me any money at all. But I am happy to announce, because this is, welcome back to the show, and this is the Announcing New Announcements episode. Here's announcement number 1. Your friendly, spiritual, socio-political commentary podcast host, who, if you recall, if you've been paying attention, is also a big theater nerd. And I don't mean just like, I like going to theater. I mean, I went to theater school for many years and also worked in the industry for many years. I'm not famous. I never, quote unquote, made it big time, end quote. But I have worked in the field professionally, and as of right now, that's my primary modality of making income, is being a live theater lighting technician. And as you know, my dear and dedicated audience. I'm trying to transition and break out into some of more artistic stuff that I'm interested in. And this is one of those vector places. But before we get too out of control, let me tell you a little bit about this new love in my life, this new group of amazing human beings, this new semi-professional. I want to say semi-professional because I don't like the word amateur, even though in its original meaning it means anyone who does or practices an art with passion, despite not having, whether or not they have training. But I digress. These new people go collectively by the name Gazuta when they play music. And when they produce other artworks, they also are known by a couple of other names like Art House Collective and 1313B Studio. And more details about that will eventually work its way into episodes of the show because announcement number 2, not only do I have exclusive rights to their music in terms of being able to use it without them suing me on my podcast, so never again will I ever worry for want of awesome, interesting music to put on the show, which has always been sort of like a sticking point. I like freemusicarchive.org. Totally thumbs up, continue to endorse them. But there was always this like quality of not being sure because their explanation of the rights usage is a little confusing. It's like they have too many options. And second of all, I'd always want to use stuff that, was a little bit over there on that side of like, I probably shouldn't use it. But anyways, I digress. They're a great resource, by the way. freemusicarchive.org. If you've never heard of them, go check them out. You will find music of all kinds and types, made, all qualities and all genres, made by all kinds of cool people. I don't know. I haven't looked whether or not Gazuta music is on freemusicarchive.org, but I might connect them to that website as we continue to collaborate and encourage them to put some teaser tracks out there, some rough cuts or some, things that they're willing to part for free to generate interest, because it's a great little community and it's a great way to get your music used. If you're an artist that wants your music to show up in other stuff, freemusicarchive.org, which does not pay me 1 red cent to talk about them. I just really am an enthusiastic fan about what they do. They organize it in such a way so that if someone finds you and wants to pay you, it's an easy step, right? Like it's a great, reliable place for music users, people, creating student films, directing theater plays, etc., to find free or very low-cost rights tracks, and then maybe even, develop a relationship with a musician or a group of musicians. But I digress. We'll have to put a pin in that. And I'll ask Gazuta when they when we finally get up, they decide. They have already agreed. That's the second announcement. Not only are they going to be on the podcast in the near future, in fact, I've already recorded a few awesome, candid conversations things, which I might go through this weekend and, pull together a few clips to create a show around. So stay tuned for that. But I'm also going to do, live shows with them. They're going to schedule to come all the way the fuck out to my place and sit in my little studio and chit-chat with me. And I'm going to go all the way to their place and sit in their studio and chit-chat with them. And we might even, if I figure out a way for it to work with me, we might even make new music live, which is one of the cool things that they do. In fact, one of the coolest stories I've heard from them so far was the concert they played for some big name that I don't remember right now. But it was a recognizable, wow, that's a pretty decently big, recognizable music name. They opened for this band, and they played a fully improvised set. They just had their jam going on live in a completely, didn't have anything prepped kind of way. Awesome. I love that kind of stuff. But announcement number 2, because this is an announcement-packed episode, they've also agreed to, not only are they going to let me use the music on the podcasts and come on the podcast as guests and maybe even do a spin-off show with me for their interests. Plug. If you're a Southern California, Orange County, Riverside County local, and you want to do a podcast, but you're lost about how to get started, and you've been listening to my podcast, hit me up. Even if you're somewhere around the world, actually. It doesn't matter. And we always can do things on the internet over awesome interwebs connections. And you've got a serious idea for a podcast. I am considering welcoming or inviting submissions for shows that I can then help people produce using my account. Because, I'm thinking about maybe expanding it on the Sprecher. And that's just random thoughts. Putting it out there, planting seeds. Holding space, but no expectations. See what happens, right? Okay, so finally, without further ado, drum roll please. I wish I had a cool drum roll effect right now. I should make a drum roll effect and load it up. I'm gonna, it's funny, I pushed the button, and I never push those buttons. And I have no idea what the sound sounds like. I have no idea what that sound sounds like. Right? It could be, I don't know, I don't know. I just see a little, okay, anyways. Announcement number 2, here it comes, finally, after all this crazy mishigas of talking about too many things at once. Which one? See, the thing is, I've been stalling because I'm trying to pick which announcement to make next. I really, literally have too many announcements to make. Oh, right. I'm going to start with the easy one. It sort of sounds like the same kind of announcement, but it's sort of next level for me. They are into collaborative writing, and after we finish another project, which I have yet to announce, they're interested in taking a look at some of the things I'm writing and maybe composing original music for that. Which they are inviting me to be like really involved in collaboratively in terms of working with them the way I worked with some musicians in the past for a play that I collaboratively wrote with a bunch of actors and musicians. I don't remember if I've done an episode about that, but I finally got my hands in a sidebar piece of music related internal news. I finally shout out to my actual real life sibling whose character pseudonym I can't Lord something. I'm such a terrible. I should have had this queued up. Sorry, bro. My brother's like, God, what an embarrassing moment. I'll edit this in a future remix update, and so it'll be comically inserted right there, blah 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 blah. It's not Lord Farquaad. I keep wanting to say Lord Farquaad because that's a funny name that I can't pronounce, but is hilarious to me from Shrek. But that's not his name. My brother has a book series, by the way. If you don't know, my actual real life brother wrote a book way before me. A big fat ass, puts Stephen King to shame almost. I think it's 800 and some odd, almost 900, almost 1,000 pages. It's huge. And it's out there to be read. If you're into weird sci-fi fantasy, if you got a little bit of that furry in you, this is up your alley. No offense, bro, but I think if you don't tap into the furry market, I don't know what to tell you. You're missing out. But I'm sure my brother doesn't listen to my podcast that often, and if he does, he probably hates it when I bring him up. But I apologize, bro. Much love. Keep on writing your amazing books, even though I haven't read them. It's not that I don't want to read them. It's just that it's so much. I don't want to get sucked into that world. I don't know if you remember or not, real life sibling, and I'm talking to you now because I don't know. You might listen to this. But when I read a book it's good, which I think yours is actually. I've sampled some pages randomly. I just get lost. I want to know what's going on in the world and what happens next, and I won't put a book down for days and days and days. So I'm kind of a multitasker with a one-track mind. It's a horrible problem. Digressing. So, if you were not aware, I myself am slowly sort of struggle busing my way through a book series that I'd love to write. And one of the members of this collective, I'm excited to announce, is a very hyper-collaborative author himself. So I look forward to, I actually had a really cool conversation with him about my own work, and he gave me some cool feedback, because that's what he's about. He loves getting down to business, talking about the written word and how it works and how a story functions and what is trying to be conveyed, et cetera, and giving, his best thoughtful advice about it. And he's a wild, wacky dude that cracks me up and keeps me on my toes. So I'm excited to share that that's a potentiality too. It's not official yet, but I have invited him to read my work on Wattpad. So if you, dear listener, listening right now, don't know about Wattpad, or you don't know about the fact that I'm writing a multiverse of literature that I hope might one day be, considered as movie enterprise worthy as anything out of Stan Lee's crazy mind, because in large part he's like a hero of mine and a huge inspiration, right? He's one of the many artists out there that helped me believe in my own insane ideas, and that somehow I can finally get around to making them happen. But I digress. Okay, so I'm going to be playing Gazuda music on the podcast exclusively for a bit, and maybe I'll branch out. This has always been true of my show, and Gazuda is just the first band. Oh, actually, technically not true. They're technically the second band. My nephew has a band called Redeem Revive, and if you're into heavy metal on that side of the spectrum, the general everything over there related to heavy metal, check them out. They might not be your cup of tea in the metal world, but they're slowly gaining their audience very strongly. They and they're signed and ready to take over the metal world. Last I heard, check them out. They gave me permission to use their YouTube videos, and I've been a horrible, horrible friend and a distant blood relative to that kid. In that my nephew is he's like the lead guy on that band. Mostly part because I keep forgetting that it's on YouTube. And I keep wanting to bum him for a track that I can edit so I can trim it. One of these days I'll make a trip to YouTube and play it so that it can get recorded on the podcast. So Gazuda Music, who comically describes themselves on Instagram as dark wave dream pop fit for another planet. And I say comically because it tickles me pink. That's how they describe themselves on Instagram. I think it's brilliantly internet perfect length of a description. I lack that. I'm way too wordy for the internet most of the time. My podcast is already 17 minutes too long. I haven't even gotten through half of the announcements. And this tea is super delicious, extra potent today. And I throw coat, so don't get excited, folks. So Gazuda Music, going to be on the podcast, going to be talking with them. They're going to be helping me by creating new music for some of my writing, which is really a thrilling idea. And I think I'm going to start with the most complete book in my collection, which is the Book of Poetry. Now, the Book of Poetry is an interesting piece because it's literally poetry that I've written and that I might add to in the future, because sometimes words just come out and it's that was a poem. And I didn't, don't know. I don't wake up any given day thinking, I'm going to write poetry today. I'm going to be very snobby about it. No, it just sometimes flows. So I'll keep compiling it there. But for those of you who've been following along and know, forgive the redundancy, but my goal with my written word is to share it in a literal sense, as literature, here's a book and I've written it, and it's just words on pages with a little bit of imagery, but also kind of bridge the gap between all the multimedia stuff that's going on, especially now that I'm blessed with having the interesting tools that are available on the Mac platform. And hey, Mac haters, I don't want to hear it. I work with both, and anyone who's obsessively, compulsively attached to Windows is missing out. And the two actually can be used together in wonderful harmony. You just need to know what's what. But I digress. So hopefully, knock on wood, this is a soft announcement, but in the coming weeks and months, maybe for a February release, there is going to be a re-engineering of my book of poetry, which if you want to check it out now, you totally can. It's over there on Wattpad. Pardon all the scratchy mouse noises. I didn't think I was going to use the internet today, and then I totally did. So if you go to wattpad.com and look up Mr. Zeppo or the book In Reality, My Love, and I don't know if the Searchy Bits cares about the punctuation, but it's In Reality, comma, My Love, ... in no capitals, so just low caps, right? And I'm gonna have to plug a bit here, or put a new note in here. But I'm gonna work towards, on the back end, to create like the EPUB version, which is gonna be, dynamic, to use slogan to describe the idea that I have, to use marketing jargon. It's gonna be visual and dynamic. And hopefully, if the words trip the light fantastic in my new friends' minds, there'll be music to go with it. I've sort of thrown the idea around with them, but I haven't sat down to schedule meetings yet. But that's in the works. So there we go. That's announcement number 2, finally out of my mouth. Let's take a quick breather here because to really come full circle and start to be able to do some of the things I've imagined for the podcast, I'm now going to just drop a track on your earballs right now. So brace yourselves. Here is your first full-length taste of, I think it's, I pulled it up to look at it to see which track it was, and I think it's track 7 of... I could be wrong about that. Don't quote me. I forgot to get the track list. I just got a sound file of the whole album, and I forgot to ask them for liner notes or whatever. But I kind of drop. I'm literally not dropping a needle, right? But if I were on the radio, if this were an old time radio show back in 1999, I'd be dropping the needle because one day, by the way, that is the dream. To set up a studio, and Gazoota's going to help with this. Actually, they're going to give me a space. I think. I hope I'm not overreading their invitation or their words, and I hope I'm not projecting anything that they're upset about. Because I feel that this is all stuff that they'd nod their heads and be like, "Yeah, that's kind of what we're talking about." But I think that it's going to be possible for a future episode live. For me and a couple of guests to be sitting in a studio room with much better acoustic, studio, sound on some sexier studio mics than this delightful and very sufficient iPad stereo mic, and be able to literally drop a needle on some vinyl and talk about the song we just played. Because as much as I'm a big music nerd, as much as I don't talk about it on the show. So like minds are activating my musicness, my music appreciation and thinking, and it's been long dormant because I've been focusing my mind in other places. But here you go. Here is what is possibly track 7 or 8 or 6 of Gazoota's Young Monet Champagne or Chaplin. I can't remember. God, I'm a terrible DJ. Here we go. Enjoy, my friends. That's Gazuda music from their album Young Monet Chaplin or Champagne. No, it's Chaplin. I think it's Chaplin. Anyways, trippy stuff, right? Like pretty interesting music. Does it or does it not take your mind places? If you liked that track, you can find Gazuda on Facebook, Instagram, and other social media places like Bandcamp, SoundCloud, etc. On Facebook, in their biography, they sort of explain their music as a mix of the melodic whimsy of 60s psychedelia, the avant-garde hypnotism of German krautrock, the theatrics and eccentricities of 70s art rock, the tones and vigor of post-punk new wave, the sweeping textures of British shoegaze, and the organic jazz-infused landscapes of post-rock, all floating on top of Afro-Asiatic-inspired rhythms. Here is another very exciting related bit of news that has to do a lot with how I found... Oh, by the way, for those of you wondering, I haven't spelled the name yet, have I? If you're on Facebook or Instagram, and you're trying to find them, in the searchy bar, type Gazoota. On Facebook, that alone will take you to their page, at Gazuda or Gazuda. On Instagram, their full Instagram name is actually at Gazuda Music with an underscore. So at Gazoota underscore MUSIC. Check it out. Follow them. Follow me on Facebook too if you haven't yet. If you're listening to my podcast and you're not following me on Facebook, come on and like all my pages. Okay, so not only is all this happening, as if that weren't enough, I am also very excited to announce that I have a professional collaborative relationship with a spiritual studio, dance, meditation, energy flow workshop instructor whose business goes by the handle Untethered Roots. So if you're on Facebook, go follow that. Give some support and love to my friend and spiritual cohort. I don't mean in the dating sense, but we just are part of this new spiritual tribe that seems to be forming around a calling to make interesting art. So that's Amelia Luna, or M as some of us call her. She runs a very dynamic and interesting energy dance meditation workshop. If you've never heard of that, it's because it's relatively new, I suppose. She has a whole story, and she also is going to be a guest here on the Almost Daily Zencast in the not-too-distant future. Hopefully, knock on wood, a recurring guest on the regular. And she's also going to join me on my the first of my many spin-off shows. If you pay attention to my Sprecher profile on Sprecher.com, you'll see that I technically run 2 shows already. The Almost Daily Zencast has many segments, kind of like the way, late night talk shows do segments, or Saturday Night Live, does segments that feature different things. But the the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo's tarot journal and cartomancy radio reading hour is really its own special thing that is in nowhere near as well organized shape as it should be. So that's getting reworked. And if we can get our other ducks in a row, Amelia Luna will be joining me there to talk about tarot readings and teaching oneself oracle divinatory practices and how they can help and how they can't help, etc. Because, it's all a very interesting and messy thing, this place we call reality. So that's announcement number 3. And now here's the connect the dots nexus. I actually met Gazuda, which, by the way, is headed up by 2 gentlemen, Adam and Josh, or Josh and Adam. They are the core of Gazuda, although there are many other people involved in a sort of rings of concentric rings of participation and collaboration sort of way. Especially once you sort of factor in the whole 13B collaborative art house collective studio collaborative thing, which of course has many bits of synergy. I don't think I've actually told them all yet directly, but I previously had envisioned a collaborative theatrical studio as a sort of unit, a working unit inside another theater company that I had an amateur, semi-professional, ongoing artistic relationship with. The theater company, not any individual person there. But I wanted to call that CTAG Studio, or Collaborative Theater Artists Group. So I like big, long, wordy names that could turn into interesting acronyms. So I met Kazuda and everyone over at 1313B Art House Collective thanks to the fact that I was invited, almost sort of randomly, to attend Amelia Luna's very, very first dance energy flow meditation workshop. And when I first heard what she was doing, because I know her through theater connections, in fact, she's performed, I think, on one of the years where I wasn't working there very much, but she's performed at the professional regional theater that I am a lighting technician at, with a group that I don't know if they are together anymore, that performance group. So we had, been Facebook friends and chit-chatted on and off for a very long time. But just recently, after really cocooning up for the summer and focusing on sort of passive-aggressively tackling spiritual practices or spiritual practice experimentation, to make up a term, and I was doing it kind of passive-aggressively. I was doing it sort of just casually, one might say, exploring and investigating and looking into spiritual practices that are theoretically intriguing and that might actually be useful should I ever, once again, gather a group of theatrical artists and others, right? Because anybody, any kind of artist can be a theatrical artist, even if they've never studied acting. But that's a whole nother episode, right? About how theater is in the vortex of all the arts at once. So here I was, kind of neglecting the podcast and neglecting my hobbies, cocooned up, focused mostly on meditation and silence and just getting through every day with as minimal mental turbulence as possible. I wasn't being escapist. I was trying to dig deep, right? To try to bring depth up from the surface, to the surface, from wherever it is we have access to when we explore the within. And I have often tinkered in a very, like I say, comically, passive-aggressive way with certain things, and one of those things is that that I've tinkered with, one of the practices is, of course, manifesting for one's own life interests. And during this process, I really focused on the question of the question I had in my mind, in my nervous, doubting ego mind, of if there would ever be a magical gathering of interesting, collaborative, not exclusively like-minded. That's an ego-trappy term, because if you get too like-minded, then you're just an echo chamber, and you're kind of building a bulwark against other things that might open your mind more. Open-minded, collaborative, artsy people with an interest to explore in exploring theater at an amateur level and at a professional level. Bootstrapping oneself from the doing it for free because we love it into the getting paid because a production company loves it kind of journey. That's I think my calling. If I'm ever going to do, the stereotype of really, really ingeniously doing something you personally really love, even if you have to do it for free until the money flows, it would be it. It would be collaborative, surreal, mystical, magical experience theater. And lo and behold, to cut a story short, because I'm rambling on way too long, I attended this energy flow dance meditation workshop, and I was intrigued, and I wanted to volunteer my effort and help to facilitate in ways, because I've also my whole life tinkered or explored or researched or actually literally gone out and tried to launch my own small businesses in the world, and obviously not as of yet to any multi-million-dollar success of any kind, but I certainly have picked up things that a person might value, and be able to give sound advice based on my own experiences, right? So in making that offer, I was then invited to connect with some of these friends of friends that Emily was connected to, because she was being drawn in towards this 1313B Art House Collective, Gazuda cloud of interesting people and with collaborative interests as well in her own life, right? As she was trying to launch her business, Untethered Roots, go support her on Facebook. Just give her some likes, man. Just get that circulation going so the algorithms share it. Because it's groovy stuff that she's doing. She's also, by the way, to give you a little bit of context to this person, who I'm giving a genuine endorsement of and for, she's a certified, trained Reiki master. She studied Thai massage over there in Thailand, I believe, and has traveled the world and has worked with communities and has worked with individuals in one-on-one energy healing, distance healing, that kind of stuff. And that's an area that I have a deep interest in, obviously, if you've been listening to the show. And that not only do I have an interest in finding out, it's not like self-service interest. I don't feel like, I'm trying to figure out if it'll heal me or not. I'm trying to figure out if there's interest and room to explore how to apply those techniques at a larger level. But I digress. So on Friday the 13th, all of this confluence of interesting, overlapping interests brought a really unique and bizarro group of people. I say bizarro in that, I couldn't have asked for a more... Excuse me, one second. I couldn't have asked for a more interesting, diverse, and yet cohesive group, right? with strong talents and no pretenses of false ego and stuff. Just really willing to have deep, genuine conversations about the state of the world, the state of your art, and how you can work together or not. And on that Friday the 13th, as a matter of fact, a confluence of interesting things happened, not the least of which, in terms of significance, was that Josh, being an intuitive, I almost want to say he's sort of like a Reiki musician, if there can be such a thing, right? I've heard other people talk about, like spiritual industry professionals, mind you. What was this one guy's name? I think I've endorsed this dude's meditation track on the show before. Rick Bader. He's got a track on Insight Timer that's one of my favorites because it's soothing and enticing and helps connect, with my inner self. Helps me connect with my inner self. The opening track, though, is sort of, permanently a part of your experience meditating with that track is how he explains that he was a musician and that he's into spiritual sound, sound baths, that kind of thing, and that he then studied Reiki, and that he's experimenting with the convergence of the two media, if one can say that, right? So the reason I point that out is that there seems to be some of that already intuitively going on with connecting. When Gazuda, and particularly Josh, connected with Amelia, the two fell right into an energy dance conversation artistically. And in fact, there is a video on Facebook right now where Amelia, explains the context and then talks about surrendering into altered states of consciousness and tapping into energy in ways that, quite frankly, I have been arguing are not only theoretically possible, but clearly must have been what we used to do, because dancing, making music, telling stories, and healing are all intrinsically intertwined in Aboriginal and Indigenous peoples' culture, which we've destroyed as part of, postmodern Western culture. And lo and behold, it sort of just makes wonderful, magical sense that people love music, people love wiggling around the room when great music is on, and that when the right kinds of tones and frequencies and stuff and the right kinds of states of mind and chosen conscious intents are all in alignment, one can indeed feel connected and tapped into real world energy flow, or spiritual energy flow, for lack of a better term. Anyways, I wanted to see how this plays. This may not be the best sound quality, folks, because the following I'm playing on a separate device, whereas this track I just shared with you, I played in the Sprecher studio on the same platform, etc. But this is a different platform, or a different device, so it may not sound super awesome, but hopefully it doesn't sound horrible. Now, you should go over to Facebook and check out the video, because what you can't see on my podcast is the dancing. And it's like wild, crazy hippie dancing, right? So if you're going to be dismissive about it, haters will be, what's the word when you endorse the rules of the thing on the thing? Haters will be moderated. That's right. I'm not into oppressing people. By the way, full disclosure, I am one of the moderators on Amelia Luna's Facebook page for her Dance Energy Flow workshop business, Untethered Roots. Yeah, there you go. I didn't want it to feel weird for anybody who was like, wait a minute. If you're in Southern California, or if you're in some of the cities targeted for future deployment, which will be a thing I announce a little bit further down the road, there's already talks in the works of hopefully being able to bootstrap ourselves into taking a state tour and then a national tour and then an international tour with Untethered Roots, meditation, energy, dance flow workshop. Dance, energy, meditation flow? Flow, meditation, energy, dance. I'm just being silly and playing with the words because, words. They're awesome, but they don't always really point and give you the full sense of what a thing it is, that it's being pointed to. But I digress. So Gazuda Music is going to develop music for Untethered Roots. Untethered Roots wants to go on tour, sharing dance, energy, meditation flow, and simultaneously, Gazuda Music wants to go on tour with the final super awesome, really big announcement that I have. Is it the final one? It should be. I've been rambling for 50 minutes. Gazuda Music, or Gazuda, has already been, previous to us all meeting on Friday the 13th under a full moon in the Anaheim Hills of Southern California, they had been working on a multidisciplinary iteration of their album. They have a new album dropping relatively soon, and I don't remember what the album's called right off the top of my head because I'm a terrible publicist. But it'll all get announced. Add them up now, and you won't miss any announcements from them. They're going to just drop this thing like nobody's business. I think they either just dropped or they are about to drop the world premiere video for a really beautiful album, a really beautiful track on the album called "I Am the Sun God." I think that's what it's called. I'm terrible. I'll get this all sorted out and cleared up by having them on the show soon. So don't stress. But yeah. So all of these things just converged together last Friday. This past just a few weeks ago. Like it's barely been a month. It's barely about to be a month. It's barely been a full moon to full moon cycle. But from one perspective, it's a lifetime in the making. It's 43 years in the making. And this group has invited me and others to participate in collaboratively translating the, I don't know if comic book or if that, there's another word, or like graphic novel is the right term for what they've already created. But there's a comic book / graphic novel based on their album, right? That Aaron, who's like the literary figure in the collective there, has already cranked out, along with Debbie, and another artist whose name I totally don't remember because I've only heard him mentioned and I haven't met him yet, I don't think. But another artist, just collaboration like crazy. 2 visual artists and a writer have created a graphic novel that is like, the album in words and image. And so what we were brought in to do next is the next level that they really are trying to break through, is that Gazuda wants to create a stage show based on the album. So these are all sort of like super crazy, trippy announcements to make, in large part because the album and stuff hasn't even really hit yet. So it's like I'm announcing things I can't talk about. But one of the most salient moments, we've had several meetings since Friday the 13th, and I forget at which meeting, but one of the most significant things that I've heard myself saying, I hadn't planned to say it, I hadn't anticipated to say it, it just grew out of everything that was going on and was like a new thing that even I was sort of surprised by. And that's this, and I'll share it with you guys as sort of like an exclusive. What we now, like, now that we've connected and we've all agreed to work together for this particular set of ideas and beyond, what we're really doing is engineering, inventing, and discovering all together, all at once, a new, an ancient, a reimagined, collaborative development process. And I'm going to leave you with that thought. But it makes perfect sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to you, don't worry. We're going to be talking about it. Like I said, I've already got some field recordings, some from being over there at their meetings or with them talking about stuff. And I'm going to trim down to some interesting, salient, cohesive segments and create an episode or two around that in the not too distant future. And they will be joining me live really soon. So these are just... I know I announced like 2 weeks ago that I had these announcements to make, and I'm getting to this, and in a way it's almost like all I've done is clarify that we've got even more announcements to make further down the road. But in the meantime, enjoy the most immediate of the announcements, and that's the new music outro for the Almost Daily Zencast, which, by the way, I'll be rotating, like I have with the other segments. I'll be rotating different things. I may be keeping others because I like them. Like, for example, the intro and disclaimer for unauthorized and explicit readings, that's never going away. Like, I like playing that in other segments, even though I'm not reading stuff, because it's funny and I like it. So, tune in to the second half. Like, check out the back end of track 1 from this album, which is just the first file that they've shared at me, because I now been offered access to their music, and then check them out on the interwebs. Let them know you heard about them from this podcast from your humble host, the incorrigible Mr. Zappo. And wrapping things up, I'm going to leave you with that back half of track 1 of Young Monet Chaplin by Gazuta.